Good morning and welcome to this week's Inside Workplace Wellness. This morning, I'm delighted to be joined by wellness trainer Calodagh McCumiskey. You're welcome, Calodagh.
Delighted to be here. Dolores, good morning.
What we're talking about today is we're talking about employee engagement, and Calodagh shared a very interesting statistic around the fact that 85% of employees are not actively engaged at work. And it was something I picked up on. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So the context around it is, yes, talking about this employee engagement piece. On that note, Calodagh, you're welcome. First of all, you might want to let us know a little bit about yourself and what you do with companies.
Delighted to be here, Dolores. And I think you were in Galway this morning. I'm calling in from Wexford, yeah.
Love
So
it.
I have a fondness. I was actually in Galway last weekend. My father was from Galway, so I often visit there, yeah. So it's a beautiful part of the world. So I'm in the sunny southeast, and that's where I'm dialing in from. But would work, I suppose, in all parts of Ireland and even outside. And I do corporate wellness programs. So I would help companies with the wellness of their people. And also I would help them devise a wellness strategy that would help boost engagement, improve the culture in a business. So, I would go in, meet with the leadership team. We see what the issues are in the business, the choke points in the business, what they need, and then we devise a strategy, a solution that would incorporate different pillars, different aspects of well-being that are most relevant to their business at that time.
Perfect. And I think that's exactly, a great lead into what we are talking about today. And we are very much talking about the statistic that you shared, as I said already. It's not everyone's statistic. So can you talk to us a little bit about this whole why people are not actively engaged at work, and you're coming from your viewpoint and as to the work that you've done yourself with companies over the last while?
Okay, great. So let's maybe first think of what is engagement. So it's involved in that they're enthusiastic about work, that they're committed, that they're committed to the success of the business, and they act accordingly. But essentially, just at a very human level, it means that their mind and their heart is in the business. Yeah, they're mentally and emotionally showing up, for work, right? And I suppose, look, people don't start jobs with the idea that they're going to be checked out. People start jobs with enthusiasm and with, by and large, yeah, that they're interested in getting involved and doing something useful and meaningful. And I suppose why people might disconnect, there can be different reasons. Sometimes they might feel disconnected. At a higher level, there can be different reasons. And then at a very practical level, there can be different reasons. So maybe just talk about it at the higher level first. They feel disconnected mentally, emotionally from the organization. They're not fully bought into the values or whatever. That might be the first reason. They might feel disconnected from their boss. The boss didn't back them in a situation. They didn't feel supported. And they might feel disconnected from colleagues, from the team. Or they mightn't, and this is an interesting one that actually quite surprised me, frustration levels at not having the resources that you need to do a good job. Sometimes a company might say, well, we're going to invest in this or that, next year, and then the budget doesn't come, and, frustration levels rise, they don't have the resources, whether that's, the skills or the actual practical resources. And I suppose then another one, which is a big term that people talk about these days, the psychological safety piece, that they just do not feel, respected, appreciated in general, within the context of the business. So, they don't feel safe to contribute. They don't feel safe to participate, engage, or to challenge. So as a result, they're not mentally and emotionally all in. So those would be the top level reasons. But then I suppose at a practical level, why would they not feel supported or bought into the values of the organization? Sometimes it can be because of an event. They don't feel that they're paid properly. They don't feel that, they feel that they're not growing, they're stagnating in their jobs. There can be a lot of different reasons. They're not being recognized. They put in a lot of effort before and they didn't feel that it was appreciated. They're flooded with work. They're just burdened with work. Overwhelmed. We're living in a sea of stress outside of work. As you know, and you've been working in this space a long time as well, Dolores. Yeah, it's particularly since COVID, you can really see an increase. The positive side is that people are talking about things, but there's a very clear rise in stress. More people are stressed more of the time, and that's showing up in so many different ways: anxiety, depression, all sorts of different factors. So look, there's loads of specific reasons, that there could be an event with co-workers, and people are talking in the canteen and you don't like it, or it can be one event. I remember once I worked in a group, and they were several years after a restructuring, people were still checked out, or quiet quitting, or not meaningfully engaged. What would you be seeing, Dolores?
Yeah, and I was taking down some notes here, about what you were saying, and totally. And I suppose, it's that whole piece around, and I talk about this a lot because I specifically zone in on the mindset piece. So I wrote down the word perception there, because really and you're nodding because I think we're both in the same wavelength in a lot of things. It's how we perceive our environment around us. And so that's not to say, what is that, what does that actually mean, what I've just said there. But, sometimes we perceive something and it's not actually the truth of a situation, because, we could go into work, as you most rightly said there, and we can have our own stressful situations at home, whether it be financial, whether it be an illness with a family member, whether we have a child struggling at school, whether we don't have children and we'd love to have a child, all of these different things. And then we could be on a team and all of these people have their backstories and they're sitting around a table. And no, we're not supposed to know what everybody's backstory is. But sometimes we perceive that people should be doing something, and it's their fault. And that's making me stressful because they're not doing that. And I think the whole thing is about when we peel back and look at how we're perceiving something. It's not that I'm saying it's our fault, but I love the whole reflection piece around, really looking at where our perceptions are maybe out of alignment with a lot of those things that you talked about. If it's, let's say, psychological safety, come back and say, why is it I'm not feeling safe here? Is it that my voice is not being heard? Is it that I don't feel as though I have the right to speak up in this organization? And it could be that there's just this disconnect between what's being perceived and what's actually the truth. Now, I know that's a whole load of wordiness I put in that there, but, I just, the whole perception thing and the values, but I'll get back to that in a minute. Do you want to add a little bit there about how we perceive a situation sometimes where it may be a little, because we're coming from our own stresses, maybe that are coming from us from home or whatever, and we're bringing this with us into the workplace. And because that is the way we are, we're motivated by what's inside of us, and that's what comes out then.
Yeah, no, and look, somebody might show up stressed, and then we might presume that they're just not interested. Yeah, stressed, they're just trying to hold it together. So they might appear apathetic or whatever, or checked out, but it's not. It's just that they're flooded with stuff, right? So I suppose a bit of emotional intelligence is really so important, and communication is so important, and to notice what are people's normal behaviors, and if they're differently than what they are, that you drill down into that, and how's everything, and you ask the person, particularly if you're in a position, do you have what you need, or how's everything going, and so that you can understand, because all it takes is one knock or shock in anybody's life to move them from managing to stretched. 2 knocks or shocks, you'll go from managing to struggling. Yeah. And, a knock or a shock can be something, a diagnosis of a family member, anything can happen. Yeah. And and that can cause a change in a person. And so that's why, like the number one factor in our well-being is the quality of relationships that we have in our lives. The Harvard Study for Health and Happiness, outlines that, and it's been going for nearly 100 years. And how are the relationships the starting point? And so that's why it's so important to establish good relationships in the business, so that we do notice when somebody is behaving differently, and sometimes you might have to reprioritize. But you're right, we should never judge and we should never assume, and we have to take account for our own perceptions, and be aware of that we mightn't none of us can see all of ourselves,
For sure.
you can see more of me than what I can see at any given time, right?
Yeah.
If we're in a room together, and we have to be aware of that. And sometimes, when we're at our most stressed, we often don't perceive that we're showing up like that. But stress is contagious, and it is shown that even that if somebody, particularly if the boss in a place has high cortisol levels, that is contagious, and that affects the cortisol, the stress levels of the people around them. So I think,
love that, Calodagh. Love that. You said that so well there.
No, it is contagious. And so we have to be, I think with the whole well-being piece and with this engagement piece, we have to be really present to what's actually going on in the environment, with the person, in the team, in the business. And, why are people disengaged? What happened? Sometimes you have to be a little bit like a detective and really, sit down, listen, understand, and work together to change that.
And a lot of this is about communication, isn't it? And how we communicate. Because you said there about, I loved the way you said that about, the manager, whatever, may have a high cortisol level. That's the way you put it. So sometimes we unconsciously will communicate from that place then, and the whole communication piece is so important. And I know it's kind of like obvious, but it's not, it is and it isn't. But as you said, like we're fueled by, all our actions are fueled by whatever we have inside of us. If we are very stressed, our actions will be, and our communications, unless we consciously correct that, will come from this place of stress. And, I put up my hand and say, I'm done it myself as well. And it's just that whole awareness piece of like how we communicate, and the fact that how we communicate is having effect on everybody around us. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that, and the power of words. So talk to me a little bit about communication and how you see, or how you would, encourage people. I'm going to talk about managerial to employees, perhaps, if that's okay with you, as to how the whole communication piece can be better, so that we won't have the disengaged employees if it's a piece around communication.
Look, I suppose, being polite and kind and thoughtful and considerate in your communications. Also, if you say you're going to follow up, you have to follow up. That reliability is key. And, in terms of change, there's a lot of disruption in the marketplace, and things the rate of change is 4x every 20 years, right? So there's a guy called Ray Kurzweil. He talks a lot about change, and so there's massive amounts of change, and change inherently, causes stress. And in terms of our psychological needs, two of the basic psychological needs, the four basic, they're certainty, uncertainty, love and connection, and significance. And those needs need to be met for all of us. And if somebody has normally two are dominant, if somebody has a high psychological need for certainty, and they're already stressed in their own life, they're going to want to have regular updates in any type of a change process. So it's really, really important to have that the business leader is very clear. And even if there is, sometimes there might be changes to the strategy or to how we're working. Sometimes as a business has values and they get thrown out the window because there's a pressure point, So people see that. Yeah. So you kind of have to, if you have values, you have to live by them, right? And
Mm.
how is communication entered into the values? Yeah, where is that? Some businesses might have a value of being straight talking, or whatever it is. So I suppose we have to be fully present to the emotional needs of the staff, but we also have to be present, professional in how we interact. Respect is a really big one. Respect, just that basic common decency between people, that basic kindness, that basic support, that two-way system of communication, and being there for each other, giving a bit of flexibility. All of this kind of would come into the communication piece. But to update people at critical points in any process builds a lot of trust and builds goodwill. And when we don't update people at critical junction points, or when we're not there when they need that, also to be respectful of communications outside of the business, say hours, and all of that. Like some, not to be flooding people with stuff outside of times. You have the right to disconnect and all of that. So it's different in different businesses depending on people's job responsibilities. But it's communicating. I would say, if I was wanted to say one word, it would be respect. Respect, but consistency. And if you have multiple teams in a business, if you have a business with lots of different shifts or groups or whatever, you want to make sure that you're not causing confusion, that the consistency in the message goes out,
Totally, clarity.
at the same time to everybody. Because when there's leaks, or things are leaked differently, at different times, that causes confusion and whatever. And when when there's misalignment in a message, that can very easily create mistrust, even if there isn't anything going on, right? But it can make people feel very unsettled. So look, I suppose we're speaking in very general sense, yeah. So I suppose different businesses would have different contexts. In some businesses, everybody has an email account. In some businesses, they don't. Yeah, there are, so how you communicate, those town hall meetings, any meeting should have to have a two-way flow. Sometimes in businesses, you'd hear of people saying that they have meetings, but nobody talks. That's a communication problem as well, right? So you want to have a two-way flow in communication, and you want to have clarity at critical points coming from the leadership, consistent clarity coming from the leadership right through to everybody. And I suppose sometimes in a communication process, if all of the leadership team or any team aren't bought into the same message, that can cause a lot of problems as well.
Yeah, and totally. And the whole clarity, for sure. And clarity also, you mentioned values there earlier. If a company, not every company has their mission statement and their value statement, etc. But even if companies do, and the employees know that the company doesn't live by them, because it's okay to Google what kind of a value statement I want and what's my mission. But if the company isn't living it, that creates distrust between everything, in my opinion, the whole communication. Because if a company says, well, we value our staff's input, we value this, that, and the other, but if that's not a lived experience, employees pick up on that. And like, I definitely will pick up on things more that kind of a way, the feeling, because culture, what is it but this secret? It's not a secret, sorry, but it's the invisible atmosphere that's in a company. And if if you don't feel that if you don't feel that you're allowed to be seen and to be heard, which again are our basic fundamental needs that we all have, then you won't really trust. If the actions of management or whoever, other teammates, aren't in alignment with the values they say they have, and nobody communicates anything differently, So there's the disconnect between that. Definitely, I would see it as a huge thing. And I think trust is huge. As employees will be much more motivated when they trust what the company says it's going to do.
100%. I suppose another thing that comes to mind as you're talking there, it's around, there's communications in general, and then there's communications at specific times of year. So I'm going to raise the idea of, performance reviews and things like that. Yeah. Sometimes when people have key feedback, it's really important to communicate that throughout the year, not just to wait for the performance review. And sometimes that can create a lot of misunderstandings and mistrust when things aren't communicated clearly during the year. And there shouldn't be surprises or big surprises if there don't have to be in a business. Yeah. So these job chats and connecting regularly with people and making sure that they're aware of how what they're doing is, if it's good feedback, constructive feedback, just in terms of what they're adding to, and that people can speak freely on teams in a business and all of that. And people will have their own norms of what they're comfortable with, and they'll have their own styles. Some people are more outgoing, and they're more kind of reserved and whatever. But you want to find a parity that works within teams. Really important.
And that brings me on to something else that I was going to discuss as well, about the whole employee engagement piece, and about this journey starting from onboarding. And I mean, not every small company would have an onboarding policy, etc. But really looking at, I think there is an onus as well on employers or whoever is doing the recruitment process to be very clear within their communication from the get-go. What is the job you're hiring for? What are the things that you need the person to have? But if you do have a culture, even if it's not visible on your website, even if you don't have a website, but if you have values, really looking to see, are you hiring as someone that's in alignment with those values, in alignment with the culture, so that because if they are, they're more likely to be more satisfied anyway. I always think of this thing, and I know people will probably laugh at this one, but like, if let's say you're in a meat processing plant and you hire someone that doesn't eat meat. Do you know what I mean? Already, it's just the most simplest way I can describe it is, I mean, their values may just be out of alignment. Now, they might be the most perfect candidate for the job, but there's something there, again, that unconscious piece that may not be talked about, hiring the right people for the job, but having that exact what you want include, does that person know what you expect from them? Have they got the strengths to do it? And are you in alignment both ways? Being clear from communication from the word go.
Yeah, no, I think what you're saying there is really, really important. I do know of some organizations that would have a culture check as part of their interview process. And if people don't pass that, they won't hire them, even if they're brilliant technically and in other ways. So some companies are doing what you're kind of talking about there. But so hiring, and then also just in the orientation program, the hand holding for the first few months, the training. And I think definitely to be clear, to give people the right expectations. I do know that some companies would say that they do give the expectations, but people want the job, and it's only when they experience it that they realize it's not a good fit. So sometimes you can communicate, but it doesn't fully translate, because I suppose you can say it, but the person maybe hasn't worked in that environment, so they're presuming that it might work well for them. Sometimes also, if it's a shift worker job, sometimes people would like it to work for them, but it doesn't always suit them. When they actually start to work the nights and whatever, they realize that it doesn't work for them. Yeah. So sometimes we can only So we can communicate, but it doesn't always, it doesn't cover every eventuality is what I'm saying. But we still have to communicate and cover most of them. And, to warts and all kind of explanations of things, not to sugarcoat things, to give people a grounded, realistic perspective of what they can expect in the job, and all of that. It's so important.
Yeah, and as you're talking there, I'm thinking of like, if there was a situation, and obviously, excuse me, it depends on the company size and that. Again, we're talking very general, but sometimes there may be, in that piece that you spoke about, that it doesn't work out. And I mean, that's life. Things don't work out. There isn't this perfect solution in everything. So, if a company really, if there's again, this open, clear communication line, and both parties are aware of this, I mean, perhaps that the person could pivot and change. Maybe that person that's on night duty will find that and again, if they know that it's okay to ask, to just mention, if that culture is there, that they know they'll be heard and they've seen, and they trust that their manager or their employer will listen to them, then it could all work out okay in the end. They might change shift. Isn't it this again, back and forth, and not presuming anything, being clear. Again, that word assumption, presumption, they come up all the time. And I do an exercise. The first thing I do in companies is an exercise on assumptions. And I love it because people laugh when they do it, because it's huge. There's just this assumption. And we bring it into our relationships even. You should have known that, but we don't always. So I think if there is that lovely flowing communication, not going to be perfect all the time, obviously, but if there's the trust there that a person will be listened to, an employee, perhaps that person can change shift.
Yeah, and the point that I think you're identifying there is really important, and that's why it's important that these things are raised quickly, because sometimes if somebody goes too far down one road, it's harder to take a U-turn. Whereas if the mismatch is identified early, it's smoother and easier for everybody, just in terms of the investment that's gone in, et cetera, and that the goodwill, remains. Yeah, I suppose I think it would also be good to maybe touch on, we're living in a sea of stress. Yeah, as I was saying earlier, and so sometimes people can be not engaged just because they have a lot going on in their own lives. Yeah, and again, I suppose it's important for employers, teams, leaders, to be aware of that. Yeah, that is the reality. I think before COVID, 1 in 5 people in Ireland had a mental health problem. There was a recent statistic, the top reason, sorry, I don't like raising these things, but the top cause of death for men under 45 in Europe is suicide. And 50% of men that die by suicide don't have any history of a mental health problem. So it's because of a disconnection. They say that the common denominator there is a concept of thwarted belonging. Yeah, so that there's a rejection, there's a lack of connection, which is related to the engagement piece. They're not feeling connected or supported. So that would be maybe the more extreme scenario, but there's a lot of people out there who have a lot going on, and they might feel lonely, isolated, challenged, stressed. They're already struggling in their own lives. It doesn't mean that they can't do a really good job, but they might need a bit of support around that.
What does that support look like for you, Calodagh, do you think? What would your advice be for someone that does have that thwarted sense of belonging, because that's huge, or someone that's feeling extremely stressed and they find that they can't engage at work?
So look, I think that the leadership teams in businesses have to have some understanding. Like, I would go into some companies and you would do orientations around mental and emotional health. I do that. So they have to have some, I suppose, comfort level in having conversations and signposting people to services and support. Some companies have mental health first aiders. I think really it's about the leadership need to be looking after have their own emotional intelligence. If you're not aware of how you are, you won't be able to see the signs in other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Daniel Goleman, the father of emotional intelligence, or one of them, would often say: if you can't read the signs in yourself of your own emotions, if you're not aware of your own emotions, you will be poor at reading them in other people. So you have to have that self-awareness and that ability to self-regulate. Yeah, the person, and get your own, what they say, put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah, for sure.
So you have to have that, and then somebody around has to have that soft skills and the empathy to make the person safe, right? In some way, so that they can express their needs about what they need to be able to do the job. Yeah, what reasonable accommodation can be done, right? It depends on the industry. Some businesses, somebody's in an office. It depends on the industry. It depends on the job. It depends on the situation. Yeah, like some people, maybe they're doing the school run, so they're able to come in later. Some businesses can't. If you're on a line in a production plant, So what I would say is that it's just about using your skills to your soft skills to connect with the person and to understand what the issue is, and maybe to just see what's going on, to observe the situation, to have the conversation, and then see what can we do, to help the person do their job, but understanding their situation. But it's reasonable accommodation, and there's parameters normally in different manuals that businesses have around that, and each industry will have their own understanding of what that looks like. Each business will have their own understanding of what that is.
Sure, yeah. And I learned this exercise from a girl called Bevan Mahan. I don't know if you know her from, I think that's Bevan, yeah, from Dental Technique.
Yeah.
She talks about using something very simple and effective called a whiffle. So at the start of each of their team meetings, they have what's called what I feel like expressing, a whiffle. So it's that way sometimes if we're coming in after doing a school run, after maybe somebody cutting through us at a red light, a stressful situation. It can be anything. It doesn't matter what it is. But when we come into work and let's say we have a team meeting or whatever, and we're coming again from that motivation of stress or whatever it is, this what I feel like expressing is a way for every team member to let out something that they need to let out from the word go. So it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be work related, but it actually makes people more, it builds empathy into the team from the start as well, where someone might say, oh, I didn't realize somebody in your family was sick and I hope they get better soon. So it builds that empathy piece in. It makes everyone feel like they've been heard and seen. Plus, importantly as well, Bevan said that you don't say, the manager doesn't say, or whoever doesn't say, now you're next, Clodagh. You're not putting someone on the spot. Clodagh, when it's your term, you say, Dolores, you're next. What would you like to get off your chest today? And it creates, I mean, most of the time, I can only imagine it would also, someone will have a laugh, someone will say something funny, but that breaks ice. It sounds simple, but sometimes we kind of can complicate things by trying to bring in complicated mechanisms when really somebody wants to express something and they can do so in a way where they know they'll be heard and that they know it's nothing to do at work, but I've said that now and I feel better. I just thought it was a lovely way to introduce this whole concept of team building and letting people be seen and heard. And that's the whole essence of belonging, being seen and being heard, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And, I've heard of other businesses or even people, they might say the close colleagues, they just say, look, I'm 4 out of 10 today. Okay. Please understand that. Or people will have a number, they'll have a word, or they'll have something, some way of expressing. And I suppose what you want to do is to negotiate those in a way within the context of a team that is comfortable and accessible for people. Different mechanisms like that will work in different contexts and will work for different people. But it's the same person that's going to work and that's at home. So I have the same chemistry. Yeah. I have the same biology. It's the same body. So, we, it's the same Clodagh that goes to work that's at home, right? Yeah. So, how I am at work and what happens at work influences me, and equally, it's the same at home. do you know what I mean? We're one person. So I think people are really recognizing that, work affects us. Yeah, it's the one place. There was that statistic January of last year, which said that 69% of people said their manager had a significant impact on their mental health, on par with that of their life partner. That's huge, much more than a doctor, much more than others. So, we spend so much of our waking hours at work. And I think employers are really starting to realize that, and they're really catching on that if we want to engage people, it's really important to make work meaningful for them. And that's one of the top ways that I would recommend to boost the engagement in a business, is to make work meaningful for people, and that can be done in so many ways. Some businesses, what they do, the service or the product that they make. If you're working in a medical device area or whatever, maybe you're saving lives. But even processes like lean and the continuous improvement that offers to people can really engage people also at work, irrespective of what's going on in their lives. Yeah. And, our highest level needs are to grow and to make a difference.
Yeah.
So giving people the opportunity to grow and to make a difference, in whatever way, whether they're the wellbeing champion or whether they're, doing something, they're organizing the staff event or party. It doesn't have to be something that's directly part of their day job. A lot of organizations do kind of charity events, and people, some of the businesses I work with, they're amazed at how, engaged the staff get. The staff would vote on which charity we're going to choose our partner with this year. And, there's loads of different ways. I suppose, earlier we were talking about the problems of why people disconnect, but now how can we get them to engage would be to communicate well, to be considerate, but to make the actual job and the work meaningful, and also make sure that any of those things that might potentially cause disconnection, values, getting all of those things right, getting the relationships right, getting the values right, getting the culture right, all of that will add to the engagement of people and make people committed, make people want to be there, make people be part of the success, so that we have to recognize them. Your most valuable asset is your employees, and
For sure.
are we really living by that? And how are we demonstrating that? All of that. How are we acknowledging that?
For sure. And you said that, you hit on something that I would talk about a lot, is purpose and meaning, because we're driven by, we have to feel a sense of purpose. And sometimes we are in a job, and I look at maybe, like, let's say let's say they take jobs. It doesn't mean that, they might be studying biochemics or I should have picked something I knew. They could be studying global commerce, let's say. I know that one. So they might take up a job in a retail or something. It's not that they're looking for this job to bring them purpose and meaning, but if they can find a way to find purpose in what they're doing is so big, because each, they're an employee just as much, and especially if they're in a retail work, that's huge. When we're in retail, again, we want them to be engaged, because if our retail people are at the front of business, so a company will want their people that are right front of business, their brand ambassadors for the company, they want them engaged. Well, we hope they would, so that they're bringing the values and the mission of the company, whoever they work with, to the fore. But how do we engage people like these, like, let's say, part-time workers, etc.? It's important, I think, to make them feel as though they have some purpose. And maybe how we do that is, again, by maybe having, always trying to have positive feedback, communication. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But it's about this. There's a way to do it. We can bring people with us, no matter whether we know that they're not going to be with us forever, they're part-time, whatever. We still want those employees to be engaged and to be not part of that statistic that is the 85% that are not actively engaged. Because especially in the retail world, these people are front and face to our company brand.
Yeah, there was there's that line, training is a huge part of engagement as well. And, I was talking about the training, the skills resources, but also the practical resources. But there's that line, what happens if we train people and they leave, and what happens if we don't and they stay?
Yeah.
Sometimes people will leave and they'll come back, so
Yeah.
it's important to have good relationships with whoever joins your business, for whatever length of time, I often hear of businesses that might hire people, say in the retail sector or whatever, and they would hire students, during summer, or, this would be hospitality and whatever, and then they'll go on a few years later to have a career. And it's because, even though they might have only started with the view to being there a couple of months or whatever, the relationship continues for, can continue for life, simply because they were engaged in the right way, from the start. Yeah.
Totally. And people will say they're a great company to work with, or they won't, and if somebody takes up a part-time job for a reason where maybe it's they know that the company isn't going to be very good to them, they might just it's good money or whatever. It's not really going in with a view to being actively engaged. It's like almost they're going in with the view to be not actively engaged and to be part of that higher percentage that we'd love companies and that we support companies to bring down. So I think it's an onus really to look and to see how we are treating even part-time workers and that, because they're so important to us. As you say, somebody could go on and change career and end up being, working in marketing and coming back and actually, talking about that job, that they were great. They were a great hotel to work with, let's say, during the summer, and apply for a job. And who knows, they could end up being the marketing manager. And we'll always share that story about, I started here when I was 18 and looking for a job, and I was given my first chance here. And this company was brilliant. It allowed me the freedom to grow and look, and here I am now back again. I think and stories sell, there's the best marketing is always through story. And if people are telling stories about companies, don't we want it to be positive and to show how the culture there helped the person and support the employee, no matter who they were and what short capacity they were there to grow, to develop, to learn. That to me is a huge thing about belonging.
Yeah, no, I have a huge affection for, the jobs that very positive memories of the jobs that I would have had, a couple of shop jobs and supermarket. When I was younger, like 15, 16, when I was in college, I also worked in a hospital, learned so much from those jobs. You really do. You learn.
And we do, yes.
You learn so much. They're very, the memories run deep on those things, because they teach you about work ethic, whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience. It definitely makes an impact, the first couple of jobs and workplace experiences that you do have. So very good.
Anything else you'd like to leave us with, Calodagh? Going back to the first thing we talked about, and that's that horrific percentage about the 85% of employees not actively engaged. Anything you want to leave us with, or let us know maybe how people can contact you if they want to work with you or to engage with you, connect with you, because we're talking about connection a lot here today.
Okay, so first of all, I suppose what I'll leave people with is that engagement is something that we have to work at. Yeah, it's something that we all have to work at, and people want to be involved. It's human nature to want to grow, to want to contribute. There are highest level human psychological needs, the top two, right? We want to grow, we want to make a difference, and work has a huge potential and part to play in that, because it is the place where we probably spend most waking hours most consistently. Yeah. So that's a great opportunity for employers. So if an employer can address any causes of disconnection, right, and inspire connection in those areas, connection to the company, to the values, to the team, to the give them the resources that they need to do a good job, be consistent in the communications and whatever, engagement is possible, particularly in a world where there's so much going on, so much busyness. The
Mm.
workplace can be an anchor because it's a place where we go consistently, despite
Love it.
so much change outside. So, you know, there's so much that can be done here. And you know, this is one thing that I love to do with people, is to work on that, on the cultural piece. Yeah. So just in terms of getting in contact with me, we'll put my email out on those, but it's just info@spiritualearth.com will get me, or Calodagh@spiritualearth.com. And we'll put those out with the links. And I'd love to hear what other people are experiencing in terms of engagement, or to help companies in terms of their wellbeing strategies, policies, plans, and to help them boost engagement, to boost psychological safety, to address the cultural issues. And I would also work, I use a framework of 12 pillars of wellbeing, covering all the different aspects. So yeah, feel free to reach out, info@spiritualearth.com.
Thanks for being here on this episode of Inside Workplace Wellness, where the conversation is always about, not that I have all the answers, but bringing other people on as well to have the discussions that hopefully will bring some sort of a spark if you want change, because change is always possible. Thank you for being here, and thank you to those who watched the recording. Thanks, Calodagh. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.